Thank you, everyone, for joining us for another Learning Lunch hosted by Format Approved. My name is Brian Johnson. I'm the Senior Director of Online Education with Format Approved, and I'll be your moderator for today's session. Today's Learning Lunch title is Social Media and Patient Education, Tools and Tips. We're joined today by Joy Rios of Practice Transformation. Joy is an expert in meaningful use and EHR training with years of real-world experience. She also has a robust social media presence, so be sure to read her Ask Joy blog on Format Approved. When you get the slides of this, you can click on that link there at the bottom of the screen and look at her blog. You can also just go to formatapproved.com and click on Content and look at HIT Answers to see her blog. You can also follow her at the Twitter handle Ask Joy Rios. So Joy is with us on webinars fairly often. These are always great sessions, and it's kind of exciting to cover a subject that we haven't done with Joy before, so we're really looking forward to this. Thank you for joining us, Joy.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me, Brian.
All right. Well, as I go over some quick housekeeping notes, I'll let you review the questions for today's session. You can see those on your screen. Remember that you can ask questions of Joy at any time during the session by entering them into the chat area. In the second half of the presentation, we'll set aside some time to address your questions. If we do happen to run out of time, answers to those submitted questions will be posted to our website and sent by email link later in the week. So Joy will address those questions in writing. And that's especially helpful if you have kind of technical questions. Also, remember that all registered attendees of today's session will receive an email with links to both the slides and the recorded version of the event. So we always get questions from folks looking to get the slides, and rest assured you'll get those after the event. All right, Joy, let's go ahead and start. So I guess the best way to start is to sort of survey the social media landscape. What are the social media platforms that stand out as the most effective?
Well, there's a lot out there. There's our big names. We've got Twitter, which is a really big one for social media right now. There's millions of users, and it's really for folks that are a little bit social savvy, and people can interact on either a one-on-one level with either other individuals, other companies, other brands. They can keep it as simple as they want, or they can actually get into conversations with large groups of people around particular topics, around current events. It's a very fast-paced, constantly moving sort of flood of information with Twitter. Facebook is, of course, a big one. Many and most of us are probably personally involved in Facebook, but it's also a very effective way to get your either your medical practice or your brand or company on there. They say that people who are on social media are 1 out of 5 minutes of the day they spend on social media, so that is definitely a place that you can get in front of people. Although Facebook has tended to change their rules on a somewhat regular basis, so I have been seeing some feedback where companies say, hey, they're not getting as much face time. But we all have different experiences with that. YouTube is a big one where there are, there's a lot of feedback coming from people that aren't necessarily interested in spending a lot of time on reading something. So YouTube is a great outlet if you have something that's visual or want to tell a story in video or animation format. Google Plus, people are also still trying to navigate and figure out what exactly is the purpose. However, because it has the Google Plus or interconnection with Google, if you're trying to increase your SEO and kind of rank a little bit higher in searches, that would be an area to follow and get involved in. And then Instagram is kind of an interesting one, and it's actually not too well tapped. So it's kind of, at least on the medical practice side of things. So think of that as potentially an open market and a newer way to go. And if you can find ways to engage with folks on, it's mostly pictures and videos, very short videos, up to about 10 seconds or so that can be posted. And then all of those typically intertwine and lead to blog posts or that are hosted on a website. So anytime you post, for example, these can all be interconnected. So say you post a video to YouTube, you can embed that video onto your blog, then tweet about it, and then have also a connection to your Facebook page. So those ones all tend to be pretty effective. And in addition to that, there's another side of things where you can go specifically to social medical sites where you can sign up as an expert, as either a doctor or nurse practitioner, and start sharing blog posts or other opinion pieces with or patient education pieces with those communities. So it wouldn't necessarily be revolving around your particular practice, but maybe around a particular specialty or expertise in a particular field.
And I would just add to that I think of all of these, Twitter is the one that I see a lot of business activity on. I mean, people also use LinkedIn, which isn't on here, but LinkedIn is a little different since it's sort of more personal and related to job searches, at least in its original conception.
I intentionally left LinkedIn out of this one in particular because if we're talking about practices getting involved with their patients,
right,
patient engagement, then
it's not an appropriate venue. Yeah,
that's right. I think that LinkedIn is more like business to business and professional relationships, not so much towards the consumer side of things.
Yeah, I totally agree. But where Twitter's concerned, Facebook, a lot of people use it for personal stuff. There's certainly good business sites on Facebook, and it's moving in that direction, I think. But Twitter is really very good for outreach from a business perspective. I just see a lot of business activity on there, and it's surprisingly easy to use, I think.
Yeah, and I think that Facebook is, like, the way I think about Facebook is a lot is as an address book. It's a lot of people that you know already, and Twitter is a way of really engaging with brand new people that you can build relationships with that you may never actually meet face to face.
That's a useful distinction. That's a good way of thinking about it. Okay, so let's say that providers have set up their social media presence. How can they get patients to actually find them in the social media universe?
The million-dollar question.
Yes.
There's lots of ways to at least make an effort to do so. So one, if you do have, if you've already set up your social media presence, you want to make sure that people know about it. So one place you can do that is add that information to your business cards, and definitely 100% put your social networks onto your website. So if anybody is actually in your website, then they can follow you socially. Get social with us on Twitter, follow us on Facebook, etc. One way to make connections is to start following other people that are doing similar things, that you share interests. So healthcare influencers. Make sure that if you're posting anything, that maybe CC somebody who is has a larger network and has already connected with many different people or brands or companies or whatever that are in the area that you're interested in engaging, and copy them, or you can put that little @ symbol and make sure that it's something that comes to their attention. Sharing it or retweeting what other people post is another way to get people engaged, and people find it really effective when you start following other people that have essentially peers and colleagues, so other providers or other medical practices that are in the similar space, making sure that you're kind of creating a community around a particular topic. Especially with Twitter, you have an opportunity to start conversations, ask questions, you get feedback, and the more you interact with the users, the more you can start sharing. Okay, well they're gonna click on your profile, potentially click on your website address, and kind of follow the trail, to see, hey, who is this person who's all of a sudden speaking up in this community conversation.
I think that for a lot of patients, they probably don't even think of their providers in this sense, and just letting them know that there's a social media presence is probably a big part of the battle right there. They're not used to seeing their doctors sort of in the digital universe, I think.
Yeah, and it's actually a really nice way to see the human side of, of your doctor. When you get a little bit of their personality or something that's coming through, then, it actually helps to build relationships, I think, on more than just a doctor-patient level, but more of a human-to-human level, which is always nice, at least from a patient perspective. You're like, oh, okay, this guy or this woman is, has a dog too, whatever. You start to see the insights into people's lives and what they care about, and then it just kind of snowballs from there.
And this is certainly something that other businesses are doing. Of course, healthcare is a special kind of business, but I think it's safe to say that providers are way behind the curve on sort of moving into this space and building these relationships with their patients who are also their customers.
And what I hear a lot is that providers are lurkers. It's not that they're not
Yeah.
necessarily there on these social media outlets, but they may not necessarily be contributing or speaking up. It's more
hmm
just kind of taking it all in. So it's not too scary to take the leap. It's really not.
All right, so we're going to cover this in a couple different ways, but what should providers keep in mind when they're sharing on social media platforms?
One thing that I have found really useful is start defining success. So knowing what it is that you're trying to accomplish, and especially if you haven't started yet, if it's something that like, okay, you're going to set up your Facebook page, start thinking that like, okay, the first big milestone is getting your first 30 followers. So then you get access to the insights and you can see how many people have viewed your post and start tracking some of the things. But having an idea of, okay, what is it, what's your goal, what are your objectives, what do you need to take? Maybe for a practice the goal is to get information about a particular, issue. If it's, if today's Earth Day, for example, so if there's any types of, you know, education that has to do with maybe being outdoors or community activities, like do you want to get people involved? Maybe you have some sort of sponsored event at your practice that you want to engage people, and you can start, posting those things online and then tracking how much involvement you get from those. So it's certainly good to know, where you're headed and start walking in that particular direction. And it's nice that you can also start, especially with different social media outlets, you can run certain exclusive offers so that you can start seeing which outlets are the most effective. So, maybe you only have 50 to 100 followers on Facebook, but you have a much larger network on Twitter. And, you can kind of post different, offers or coupons or savings and see which ones are more effective to kind of help make your decisions down the line. But most importantly, it's important to do things because they're right for your business, not just doing it. Don't just do it because somebody else is doing something similar, or following the bandwagon. It's more a matter of just making sure that you're doing something that is right for you, and a lot of times it helps with engagement if it's something that it is fun or personable and people can relate to it. So if it makes people laugh, people tend to get involved. It's interesting to see the comedic and funny side of marketing your business, even if you have a very serious business.
So I'm sure there's providers who would say to all of this, well, what is the point of all this? So maybe it's helpful if we run through some of the benefits of engaging patients through social media.
Sure. Well, imagine if you put a bunch of education out about a particular topic. Maybe it's, good food or healthy exercise routines, things, physical therapy, anything that is related to your specialty, anything that strikes a chord with any of your patients as they come in, it may open up conversations that they are, able to, start a little bit farther down the path in the exam, say, hey, I saw that you posted this information and I learned, X, Y, and Z about my particular problem, and then they may feel a little bit more comfortable talking and opening up about it. So that there is the potential for more productive visits. And if patients have a little bit more information about what it is their conditions are, and those conversations are effective between the doctors. It could potentially reduce the number of unnecessary tests. Physicians get a little bit more satisfied when patients are a little bit more engaged, and it's possible to get, just a little bit more team playing. I like the idea that patients, have the ability now, especially with all the resources that are available on the internet, to get as involved as they want in their own care. And you want folks that are coming in and saying, hey, I've been tracking my steps for however many months, and it kind of helps just lead a conversation about the patient's health and how they're engaging in maintaining that. What do you think, Brian?
Oh, absolutely. And the other thing is that I think, especially given that there's a lot of kind of dubious information out there, it can also, you can direct your patients to reputable sources. So you can sort of cut out some of the noise and interference in terms of, somebody's blog that has no idea what they're talking about. So I would say that's another benefit of sort of pointing them to good resources.
Yeah, and the other thing is you have an outlet that if you introduce new items into, for example, patient portals are going to be are increasing in numbers. So there is one way of communicating with your patients, of getting involved. Say, hey, did you know that your health records are now available on our patient portal, and you can access them here. So you can certainly start guiding folks to the resources that your practice has available that maybe they weren't aware of, or they don't get that access just by going into their annual exam or whatever it is they come in, however often they come in for a visit.
Now, I would say here on where you're talking about increased patient portal use, I think that would be a key use of it, I think, especially this year with Meaningful Use Stage 2 starting. So, getting the patient portal set up is one thing, but getting people to use it, I think there's a lot of anxiety among providers that patients won't really be interested in doing it, that they'll have difficulty reaching thresholds and that sort of thing. If you can just sort of regularly have a drumbeat of, did you know that you can access your lab results through our patient portal? Here's where you go to sign up. That sort of thing, I think, is an obvious way to tie your social media in to an incentive goal, but also a valuable medical goal, which is to get people to use that patient portal.
Right, and finding different ways of saying the same thing. So some people respond really well to, just a little bit of a hint. So maybe it only requires 140 characters, but, maybe you have a step-by-step instruction booklet that you've hosted online that you can, or on your website that you can point to. Some people use, an animated version of something, even, a video or a comic of, here's this particular character. I mean, people really engage in such different ways that you have an opportunity to send the same message in many, through many different outlets and many different formats, and, just see which ones are the most effective. So I do like that piece of social media in the sense that it, you have room for trial and error. A lot of this, and especially with Twitter, things happen so quickly, and they move down that line so fast that you can continue trying again and again, and you're not going to necessarily lose points, or nobody's going to. If something didn't work, that's fine. Just keep trying.
Yeah, there's a really ephemeral quality to Twitter that's kind of it's got its pros and its cons, but it certainly encourages experimentation. So let's talk about some best practice tips and guidelines for physicians who use social media. And this is something that I almost added to the earlier slide, getting ready for today. But as long as we cover it here, I'm sure people are aware of this anyway. HIPAA, obviously, is one thing that providers need to keep in mind. So let's talk about that first.
That's right. So, big no-no, large, huge, outrageously gigantic. Do not write about specific cases or reveal any patient data. In fact, it's probably better that if you do have if you do want to write about some encounter, make sure that all patient names are changed. Even if there's a particular problem or condition or encounter type that is being talked about, you can even change it slightly. Even change the dates. Say if you're a doctor who's telling a story about, oh, I had a patient, etc. Just make sure that all names are changed. Any sort of revealing information is not included. It is very, very important to make sure that you're not diagnosing anybody. Really, the purpose for social media is to engage people and educate them, and not offer any medical advice that would otherwise require them to actually see a doctor. It is certainly not to be used in place of a visit to the doctor. So it isn't, so instead do things, sharing things that are somewhat generic, things of value. Make sure that they give people an idea of, like, here's a great article on how smoking cessation, etc. Or here are ways that people can get engaged. Here's tools and resources. And hashtags, they're actually they're an amazing tool. And I don't think that Twitter ever, and I think Facebook is starting to use them too, but I don't think they ever intended for them to be as valuable as they have become. But hashtags can generate thousands of responses and people getting engaged. So, for example, with HIMSS this last year, there were something like 76,000 tweets around that had the hashtag HIMSS14 for 2014. So people that were involved and sharing and retweeting and conversing all about things that were coming up. In a medical practice or health center or hospital, or even a brand that is in the healthcare industry, you can use hashtags and start kind of mobilizing around a particular topic. So, for example, some people have used things like to quit smoking. Hashtag quit for good could be an example where you have the American Medical Association and a number of different organizations all coming together, where you announce, okay, we're going to be having this conversation, hashtag to be include this particular hashtag in your tweet or announcement, and then all of these different people can start coming together and move the conversation along. And you've seen them over and over and over, but they are very, very effective. And it's certainly a great way of finding either like-minded individuals or like-minded companies, or just people that are interested in learning about these same topics. Another one, Heart Chat, hashtag Heart Chat. And there's one that I pay attention to on a regular basis, HITSM, so that's Health IT Social Media. And they do regular tweet chats, Twitter, chats that are on Twitter at a specific time on a specific day every single week, where you can kind of meet with the same or whoever's decided to participate in that conversation around that time. So it's a great way to just get your personality out there. I always, in sort of an alternative way of getting involved, things, TBT, I haven't participated in these yet, but the Throwback Thursdays, where people are, they're definitely very entertaining, and it can be, maybe it's a picture of you in medical school, or, your dog when you had puppies, or something along those lines. But it's the kind of thing that's different. It's not necessarily news related, but it certainly gets a smile on people's faces, and it can be a way to engage with a community weekly.
The other thing I would add, I'd like to circle back for just a minute on the HIPAA concerns. It's important, if you're doing social media in the office, you need to have social media policy in your practice. A lot of this is really common sense, but it should be spelled out, because where people have gotten in trouble with social media isn't usually that they're, writing on Facebook about a particular patient. I think people understand that they shouldn't do that. What has happened is that people have taken selfies at work and posted those things to social media and not thought about the fact that there's open patient records behind them on the screen. And so there have been practices that have gotten sort of dinged on those violations. And so it's just important to be aware of your surroundings. Certainly if you're taking any kind of photograph, be very careful about what can be seen behind you. And just be sure that everyone understands that social media is a great tool to use, but it needs to be used in the right way.
That's a really good point. And also, if, say, for example, a medical practice is just having one, one Twitter account, obviously, or just one Facebook page, it's okay if multiple people update it and keep it going or manage it. It's not just that it can only come from one particular person who has the login information to the Twitter account. People take it in a lot of different styles. Some people will have an entire team of people managing one particular account, and other organizations are so large that they may actually require different accounts per department. So, a hospital may have an account, a Twitter feed for their pediatrics department, and another for OBGYN, and have them connect with each other around different issues and educational pieces. So there's a lot of different styles you can take, but it's just really important to definitely not reveal any protected health information.
So why move to engaging with patients in social media?
Well, if we're trying to get people to, engage with their own health, and this is I love the saying, fish where the fish are. That's where people are. So people spend 1 in 5 minutes a day on social media platforms. So it's truly where patients are, and it's our obligations to make sure that they have accurate content that's available to them and helps them make appropriate healthcare decisions. So it's important to make sure that we're part of those conversations that folks are reading online. So as providers and as medical and healthcare staff, we get to add value to that conversation. So, there are ways that you can start encouraging people, like by showing success stories and being an inspiration for patients who are maybe struggling or going through something. It's always very comforting to know that somebody else has been in that position and that they have overcome it, the adversity that they've gone through. It's also really helpful for people to, on their own time, at their own pace, to understand, some common procedure and treatment options. It's not always something that you want to be reading about in a waiting room or in an exam room. If somebody can get prepared for what it is that they're about to experience, it's always a little bit helpful. And then there's other ways that, other uses where you can gather information. I mean, there's so many different opportunities. You can survey, what are people interested in, and start, responding and having a conversation of, with what your community is interested in. And I just think it's a great way to build relationships and keep people wanting to come back to your practice. And so when you can even do things like celebrate the birthdays that are coming up, right? Actually, birthdays of staff, not birthdays of patients.
Right. Yes, you don't want to reveal the birthday of a patient, but you can certainly. Again, it's another way to personalize staff to say, oh, it's so-and-so's birthday. Obviously,
sure.
If they're comfortable with it.
Of course, right. And it's great if you can post videos and photos, but of course only with permission. So that is certainly the tough part of doing social in a medical and healthcare setting. You just have to make sure that everything is with permission and is following the HIPAA rules. So I guess that can't be stressed enough.
But so much of this comes back to personalizing the practice, and also I think it's part of this transition that we see in medicine toward kind of a more retail sensibility. I think as sort of all of healthcare evolves, there's more of this kind of consumer mentality around it. And having a presence that is friendly to patients and that sort of personalizes the practice instead of it being kind of a faceless bureaucratic machine, which unfortunately practices can look that way. Hospitals certainly can look that way. These are very simple things that providers can do to sort of make themselves seem more personable and human. And really, this really is a human enterprise. So it's, it's just sort of the truth, but it's a way of expressing the truth that I think makes practices more appealing.
I agree.
So this, I think, is where we're getting into kind of the nuts and bolts of this. What are some ideas that can get providers started on social media?
So I found this amazing tool recently, and it's on this simpler.com website. Now, it has literally every single healthcare hashtag and tweet chat organized. So if you're looking for like, okay, yeah, sure, you can start your own hashtag or you can hop on one of the popular ones. But this website in particular actually has a list of all the conversations that are scheduled around healthcare by day, by time zone, by, and by topic, so by specialty, by condition, etc. So you can literally go in and say, okay, well, what conversations can I contribute to, and start there. That is a really, really useful tool. Other ways, if you're just looking for, okay, I'm not interested in getting involved in that whole hashtag or tweet chat conversation just yet, you can start using your social media to start letting your patients know what's going on in the area. So maybe if there's any, I live in California, so if there's ever been an earthquake or if there's something that's going on, there's real-time alerts and reminders that in the case of an emergency or some event that's going on around me, then I could get access to information that is specific to those. So that's something that providers and practices can participate in. Another one, this is kind of an interesting thing, is that if the provider is running late, you can certainly give patients an idea about whether or not they need to rush in to be, into the waiting room, or if they can take their time if they know which doctor that they're seeing. That's something I have seen before, but it has not been super, super common, but it does exist. And also, resources in the neighborhood. Where can somebody get a flu shot? What clinics, in your area offer those tools? If you create if you have any educational videos, I'd highly recommend, getting them up on YouTube. So if it's not something that you've already created, you can find some that you particularly think are useful and direct patients to that information. It doesn't necessarily have to come from and be created by you and your practice and your facility. It can be something that is just like, hey, I support this particular piece of information. I want to point and guide my patients to it. And I've seen other practices that they do things like they have an annual fitness challenge, or maybe they're getting involved in a 5K or a 10K, and they start posting progress pics of staff members who are involved in different areas. I mean, that's a little bit more on the creative side, but it's really interesting to see the different ways that you can share the human aspects of medicine. You can start teaching what it is you do, talking about work-life balance with others, and really just jump into these conversations. And I don't know, I really, really like that simpler hashtag tweet chat resource. I highly, highly recommend going there.
Now let's look at some people who are doing this well. Here's some people who will be able to click on these in the follow-up. but tell us a little bit about these doctors who are doing Twitter right.
Sure. There are a lot of folks out there who have paved the way. And Kevin MD, oh my goodness, if you haven't heard his name, I would be surprised because he is a very, very, very popular tweeter, blogger. He has a very big, website, and is constantly using social media to gain attention and, spread information. And, this gentleman, Dr. Mike Sevilla, he's a family physician and primary care advocate. Others are self-described, geek medical doctors. This woman, Dr. Binky, she's an OB/GYN, and she shares things like causes for miscarriages and how to cope with them, that sort of information that's relevant to her particular practice. And Dr. Kim, he's a mobile health enthusiast, so he wears one of those Fitbits or one of those devices that kind of checks in with where he's at. So it's his. I was looking at his Twitter feed the other day, and it was really just like he's all over town, and you can see where it is he is. So looking at his stats, and that's a little bit way of connecting with people, saying, hey, I'm physically active, and you can be that way too. And then of course you've got like Oprah famed superstar Dr. Oz, who's out there, and he is a great example of getting people engaged and educating, and does all through all sorts of outlets. So he does a lot of major events where he'll take a community and do free exams for over 1,000 people within a day. So one way that he gets the news out, obviously, is through his Twitter feed. But if you're looking for inspiration, I would say that these folks are a great place to start.
So what do they do that providers, obviously there's only one Dr. Oz out there, but what can providers do to sort of emulate their best practices?
Well, one thing that these guys are active users, so they make sure that they're tweeting on a regularly, often more than 2 times per day. And that's a lot. I have to admit, like even I have a hard time keeping up with that, but I think that it's part of realizing that engaging with people on social media, and specifically Twitter, it's part of your workday responsibilities. So if you look at the data and how often, and when these doctors are tweeting, more than half the time it's between 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. on their particular, at their time, in their time zone. And because they do this on a regular basis, they typically have, a minimum of 150 followers, oftentimes a lot more. And to be honest, the majority of the group that we were just looking at, I think Dr. Oz has 3.3 million followers. So when he says something, a lot of people hear it. And also they connect with each other. So that's one thing that's been found to be extremely effective, is that a third of the doctors are followed by at least 20 other doctors, and then they reciprocate each other. So if one thing has something good to say, then they can say, oh, I agree, or whatever.
Well, go ahead, Joy.
Well, I was going to recommend one thing that I found extremely useful, specifically within Twitter, and I guess Facebook as well, is using the search field. So if you're kind of in a position that you're like, hey, I don't know exactly what I'm looking at, or if you're looking to be part of a conversation in particular, you can use the search field. So for example, just type up there patient engagement, and you can get a long list of anybody who has used those words within their 140 character limit, and say, okay, well maybe this person would be worth following, and kind of gauging where people are. Go ahead, though.
I was just going to say that part of the thing about Twitter that's nice is that Twitter messages are, by requirement, they're very short. And so making a couple of quick comments on Twitter is really not that difficult. And doctors have a lot of information that patients probably are not aware of. So tweeting things like links to articles and that sort of, you know, providing resources that we've been talking about, those things are pretty easy to do, pretty fast to do, and it just keeps an active Twitter presence, but also is useful to a lot of people. So part of what's interesting about following people on Twitter is that you see a lot of different interests. And Twitter is also a great news source. So I follow a lot of different science and medical journals on Twitter, and it's actually a great news aggregator. I like it more for that than any other portal that I've got. You know, so people use various aggregators, but I think Twitter's a great one because it just all pours in. You can sort of, you know, parse through it and see what you're interested in, and then share things with your followers who they probably do not have the same interest that you do, and so it sort of gets the word out on important topics.
Yeah, and I think that part of this whole active, one easy way to be an active user, if you're still a little bit timid about, writing the first posts or first tweets, retweet or modify a tweet. I mean, that's one way that if you are following another doctor and are just retweeting, even if you were retweeting Dr. Oz or retweeting Kevin MD, then that certainly shows up in your feed, and it adds something that, maybe you're building your catalog of things that interest you, so that then people have an idea of like, oh, okay, I'm interested in that too. I'm going to follow this particular person.
So let's talk about blogs. Blogs have been around for a while. There's a bazillion blogs out there. Tell us why these blogs are especially successful, and then we'll go on to what people can emulate.
Okay, sure. I started by searching just, okay, who are the physicians that are out there that are really making a difference in the blogosphere? And this woman, Dr. Kimberly Manning, she really popped up. She was so personable. I really, so GradyDoctor.com. She is very active, and it's kind of an old school. It's not like she has a very sophisticated website or anything, but I was really impressed by her tone and the way that she was connecting with the audience and her readers, and really being very specific about what it is she does and how she engages. And one topic she wrote about, I think last week, was one of her patients came in and had a bag full of his single cigarettes, and and it brought up the conversation for her about how she was so happy that he actually admitted to her that he was a smoker, and confronting it. So and then that particular blog post was about, hey, it doesn't do anybody any good if you're lying to your doctor, and then starting a conversation based on that. So it wasn't a conversation particularly about the patient or his condition, but just the engagement in between of like, what are the consequences when you don't tell the doctor what's really going on in your life, etc. This next one, Dr. Hornstein, she is somewhat of an old school doctor, and I thought that she had an interesting viewpoint, because she calls herself, I'm a dinosaur, but I'm not dead yet. So she kind of is walking people through what it is what's her experience going through all of this change as somebody who's somewhat old school and not particularly tech savvy. So it's nice to get a little bit of insight into her perspective. Dr. Westby, Dr. Fisher, he was more interested in, he's a cardiologist that writes more about his opinion on policy and sharing experiences about what's going on in government side. So I find that stuff particularly interesting. And then lastly, Dr. Orange, she is somebody who, she doesn't actually have her own website. She signed up as an expert on a website called a medical healthcare community called ShareCare. And so she signs up as a user, and it's a way that patients can engage and ask any questions from a whole group of all types of doctors and say, hey, I have this particular problem, and she can post answers to those, and as she posts more answers, she kind of rises to the top as a little bit more of an expert in her field. So she can either converse and communicate directly one-on-one with patients in a way that other patients have insight into it so that more people benefit from it, or she can write a particular blog post on a particular problem and go from there. And either way, it's multiple, she controls her bio, she has her website, her practice address, and all sorts of other information included on her profile page, so that if people want to know a little bit more about her and maybe go see her in her home setting, then they can follow the trail and do that as well. So it's different styles of engaging and gaining followers and gaining just inspiration, and these folks I found them all to stand out in a different type of way. And then I wasn't going to list all of them, but I found blogs worth reading, this link down here, that it defined them by topic. So depending on what your style is and what you're interested in, and then there's a long list, 59 physician blogs that you can go check out, the different styles, topics, and communities that these people have built. So happy reading.
So you've touched on this, but what are the things that these bloggers do that people should emulate in their own blogs?
Well, one thing that I really think is important is they're controlling their online presence. So instead of just having it be where somebody can Google your name and then whatever they find, you're really putting yourself in a position that you get to control what online presence that you have. And so do that in whatever way that it makes sense to you, but what is common, these people have put themselves out there by telling stories, sharing their personal experiences or sharing their professional experiences, making sure, of course, that they're doing this in a way that if anything with patients is involved, they get their permission. And they're also not going on and on and on. They may be consistent, they may be posting on a regular basis, but they're typically keeping their posts shorter than 1,000 words. So imagine, 3 pages typed, maximum.
Yeah, because blogs are sort of, it's kind of an interesting form of, I think of it as journalism, but it's shorter typically than an opinion column. Obviously, it's longer than a tweet. It's kind of somewhere in this middle ground of usually, it's not an article. It's more like a commentary on something.
Right, and if you want to be consistent, if you want to have the opportunity to, you want to be an active user, you have to do something that's sustainable. So if you're in a position that you're writing, a 5-page essay once a week, I'm sure that you're already strapped for time. That's probably not going to be sustainable. So making sure that you keeping it short is probably one of the more important pieces of how to be consistent over time and make your online presence last.
Yeah, I think the sweet spot is really 400 to 600 words.
Yeah, and it's a good practice. It's a very good practice of learning, okay, what point am I trying to make? How can I say it in a way that's interesting? And, and then making sure that you're using all of these different social media outlets to get eyes on your piece. So that's kind of where it's interesting because they all integrate. You may write a piece on your blog and then post it on ShareCare, and then also post it on Twitter, and then also post it on Facebook, and who knows, maybe you have an email, a newsletter that you send out and point to it there as well. So there's a lot of options.
So what are some tools that providers can use to sort of, boost their efforts in this regard?
Okay, so I found quite a few. Some of them are free. Some of them cost some money, but and some of them have different levels of subscription. Hootsuite, this is a really common tool that's used by people that are managing any kind of social media, and it's a tool that you can use, I believe, on your computer or on your phone, and you can track multiple social media accounts at a time. So, for example, you can post to Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and maybe Foursquare, Instagram, all at once. You can schedule them, so it's something that, you know, maybe you spend one day a week and get all of your posts ready. That's another trick that you can do, and sort of outline them throughout the days and weeks to come. Community, commune.it. I just learned about this one recently, and it's a really great tool that helps you see who's following you, who's active, and especially when your numbers of followers, people that you follow and follow you back, start to get high. You can start seeing, okay, who are my supporters? Who are people that are actively engaged with me? Maybe I should thank those people. And you know, it recommends different actions for you to take, and also gives you a lot of insight into what's actually going on sort of behind the scenes that, you know, you may not be thinking about right away. The Mayo Clinic, this is really cool. They actually have social media boot camps, and I've included the link here, and it's a week-long boot camp that is aimed specifically at providers and their practices and their practice staff on how they can start using social media in ways to help them, you know, either engage their patients, educate their patients, bring more patients in, etc. And this next one I included because I just am assuming that there are some people here that don't even have a website. And I don't know how common that is, but it is entirely possible. So folks that don't have a website, you can go to ProSites, and they essentially specialize in medical websites. So they have they have a pretty big catalog, and it's every, you know, maybe 10 to 15 different specialties, including dentistry and whatnot, that you can kind of plug and play different pieces of patient education, and you know, including your directions. Essentially, you type in your contact information, your, you know, the profiles of all the doctors in your practice, and then different pieces that you may want to educate, potentially even have an appointment scheduler built in. And it's a very, very quick way of getting online without having to start from scratch. So,
yeah, people may not be completely aware of the fact that it's gotten really easy to have a website now. There's basically wizard-based tools that will build them for you.
Sure. And I think it can be very intimidating to think, oh no, I've got to get a designer, and I've got to learn all this stuff, or it's going to cost a lot of money. But it really doesn't. These ones are extremely affordable. A lot of them are, you know, subscription based for, you know, dollars a month type deal. Sharecare, I had mentioned, that's something that doctors can sign up as experts, and that is one way to really plug into a community. So if you're somebody who wants to be giving advice or known for being an expert in a particular area, then you can start searching their platform and seeing, okay, what questions are these patients asking, and how can I contribute and help them find some answers. And that's one way of getting more visibility to you as an individual, and also to your practice. Recently, I've been made aware of companies that will manage your blog for you. Depending on the size of your practice, this probably isn't a good fit for the smaller companies or smaller practices, but for folks that are much larger, there is the option. So one company that does this type of work is called Agency 1022, and they focus specifically on healthcare, the healthcare industry. So they may be able to find, you know, go through what it is you're looking for, what it is you're interested in projecting, and help you curate and send that message out. And then by following the trail, this gentleman, Dr. Bertalan Mesco, he was one of our Twitter influencers that we talked about a few minutes ago. He's written a book specifically on social media in the clinical practice. So that is available on Amazon. I think it's less than $30 or whatnot, but it goes into, you know, as a clinician, what should you be doing, and it going into much more detail than we are here.
All right. Well, we've nearly reached the end of our time, but we do have time for a couple of questions. We've already got some questions in, but if you'd like to ask something of our presenter, please go ahead and type it into the chat area. If we don't get to it now, Joy will certainly follow up and give you a separate answer to your question if we don't get to it. So the first question I'll share with you, Joy, is tell us more about the medical social media and are they worth using?
Well, one thing to consider is medical social media, for the most part, is oftentimes, not always, but sometimes free. So if you have the time to get involved, there's really not much to lose. So it's really a matter of like, okay, well, find out what is available, how can you participate, and then take one step at a time and see if it's something that matches what you're trying to do. What are your goals? And if it is putting you in front of patients and giving you a little bit more of an influential network, well, then absolutely, it would certainly be worth the time. But I think it depends on what you put into it and what you expect to get out of it.
All right. Well, we're nearly out of time. I think we'll go ahead and do our wrap-up now and send on those questions to Joy to answer after the event. Remember that you'll receive an email with links to both the slides from today's session along with the video recording of it. So look in your email box for that along with answers to your written questions. Do you need certification in meaningful use, PQRS, or HIPAA compliance? You can take a 20% off of our retail prices by purchasing Format Approved training through Joy Rios' site at www.practicetransformation.com/training. Be sure to use the discount code PTRANS20 to receive that 20% discount. You'll pass it immediately through into our learning system, and you can begin training on your own schedule. Thank you, Joy, for joining us today. It's always a pleasure to have you with us. It was fun to cover a subject that we haven't covered previously.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Sorry for going a little bit longer and not allowing more time for questions.
That's quite all right. It does happen quite often with these learning lunches. You can visit formatapproved.com to learn more about our upcoming learning lunches. The Learning Lunch button will take you to our upcoming webinars. That's right there on the homepage. Push that button, which you can see on your screen, and you can see the entire list where you can learn more about each event and register. Our next Learning Lunch will air next week, April 30th, and we'll cover the HIPAA security risk analysis, pros and cons of self-assessment tools versus expert HIPAA report guidance. So we're going to have our expert Anupam Sahai of eGestalt Technologies with us on that webinar. Should be a lively event, so please join us. Keep an eye on your email box on our homepage for other upcoming topics, and thank you again for joining us today.